welcome back to Cindy's Library. This is Cindy, and today I'm going to talk about what I read in the month of May. So let's get to it. First of all, there it is. I read Where the Crawdads Sing, and I don't have written down who that's by. Read this for a book group. This is not the type of book I typically read or enjoy. Our main character, she grows up in a difficult situation, abandoned by her mother. Her father's an alcoholic and neglectful, and he's not abusive. And it goes downhill through this girl's life from there. It is kind of interesting in that for, I'd say, about the first 2/3 of it, though, it is structurally interesting. We start with a murder in the swamps of, I think it's South Carolina. And we go back in time, maybe 15 years, to when this girl was little, the day her mother left them. And then about 2/3 of the way through the past narrative, which makes up the majority, but not all of the first part, catches up with the quote-unquote present day. Beautiful descriptions. In some ways, it was interesting that this girl managed to do in spite of everything. But no really likable characters. And I was hoping for a redemptive end that would recontextualize everything and save the story for me. I'm sad to say that was not the case. So I would have DNF'd it, but it was for a book group, so I can say I've read it now anyway. If you like that type of story, go ahead and give it a try. Personally, though, I don't recommend it. I understand that this book is rather polarizing. I'm obviously on the didn't like it camp. I'm sorry to say. But the rest of the month was much, much better. With too many books. I read a bit of Nikolay Gogol. Specifically, I read The Nose and the Overcoat. And talk about absurdist fiction. I quite enjoyed it. The Nose is about, well, there's a barber who's accused of stealing someone's nose, and then there's the guy whose nose he is accused of stealing, and the nose itself becomes a character. And in the Overcoat, you get the most nondescript government worker who happens to need an overcoat and how that changes his life, and the ending is rather unexpected based on the start as well. I actually quite enjoyed these. I look forward to reading more of Nikolay Gogol. He apparently also wrote The Government Inspector, which is what the Inspector General that Danny Kaye starred in is apparently based off of. So I have much to look forward to, it appears. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Oh, I read Last Bookshop in London by Madeline Martin. This is a cute, sweet book. You start with Grace and her friend Viv. They leave the countryside to go to London for work. They want to get out of the countryside and away from their families for various reasons. Of course, this is exactly when World War II is about to start. And our main character, Grace, she ends up as an assistant at a bookshop. Of course, then the war starts and everything changes, but the bookshop affects Grace's life and the lives of many around her who she also affects. I liked it. I can't say I loved it. It's not necessarily a deep book. It's but I enjoyed it. It is very sweet. I'm glad I read it. Let's see. I also, yes. I read Bilbo's Journey, Discovering the Hidden Meaning of the Hobbit by Joseph Pearce. And so this is looking at the Hobbit from a Christian point of view. Uh, sto- Journey motifs, why spiritually Bilbo needs to go on a journey, spiritual nature of dragon sickness, all sorts of things like that. I enjoyed it. Glad I read it. And it's been too long since I've read something like that in any case. Oh, David Copperfield, my love. David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I started this actually in April. And I got about halfway through it in April, and then I couldn't put it down and finished the second half of it in the first half of May after I read Where the Crawdads Sing. I'll put the link to my full review below. Let's see, I read The Tempest. Very enjoyable. Still not quite sure I understand all of it, but the story of the magician Prospero and is using magic to conveniently arrange everything so that the world is put back the way it should be, and the righteous are blessed and the wicked are punished a little bit. You have to understand, Prospero, he was the Duke of Milan, but 12 years before the start of this book, he was ousted by his brother and by a neighboring kingdom. So, but this is a redemptive story where everything does turn out the way it should at the end. Loved it. Let's see, I also read All in a Name, which is case file 9 in the case files of Henry Davenport by Honor Raconteur. Have to admit, this may be my least favorite so far. Probably though because of how serious this one is. Not that serious things don't happen in other ones, but this time it becomes more personal. We have Robert Martin. He is a criminal who our heroes Jamie and Henry put away. More specifically, Jamie, I guess. Anyway, he is found dead in front of Jamie's apartment. And so she and Henry start investigating, and the more they do, the more troubling things arise, and people they care about start being targeted and hurt and even killed. Like I said, this is a darker one. Still enjoyable though. Still has the classic Henry and Jamie wit, at least in places. Obviously, given the subject matter, they are serious much of the time. Can't blame them. Then I read Alanna, the First Adventure, and The Hand of the Goddess by Tamora Pearce. First two books in the Song of the Lioness quartet. Really my favorite two books in the quartet, I think. So, last month and maybe the month before, I read about Kel, the Protector of the Small. Well, this is 20 years earlier. Alanna is a young lady of about 11, I think, and she does not want to be trained to be a young lady at the convent. Thank you very much. Her twin brother, Thrum, he wants to be a great magician, not a knight. Thank you very much. So, since in the city of the gods the boys are taught magic, they decide to switch places. So Alanna goes to the capital to become a knight. Thrum goes to the city of the gods to learn magic. Of course, this is when female knights are unheard of, which complicates things, especially as Alanna becomes a young woman, whether she wants to or not. This is in addition to the regular trials and travails of being a page and then a squire. She's a page in the first book, a squire in the second book. She makes friends, she makes enemies. She learns a little bit about herself, which is good. Very enjoyable, and that's where it all starts, in that world. Let's see, I also read The 9 Tailors by Dorothy Sayers. Peter Wimsey is back. We do not have Harriet Vane in this one. This all starts when Lord Peter and his manservant Bunter they encounter bad weather on their way to some friends right around New Year's. The car gets stuck off the road. Fortunately, there's a village nearby, and since there's been illness in the village and they don't have enough ringers, and Lord Peter has experience with change ringing, he volunteers to take the last place in ringing. So we have that. Nice time there, considering they got stuck there. And that would be the end of it. Except that I think it may have been the day after New Year's. I think it may have even been while Lord Peter was still there. The wife of the local squire, essentially, she dies. And then about 3 or 4 months later, the squire himself dies, which is fine. But when digging up the new grave right by the wife, they find a body, and no, it's not in a coffin. It isn't even female. And everything points to things that happened New Year's Eve and New Year's Day when Lord Peter was there. And so he gets called in to start investigating. So, very interesting. Tons about change ringing if you are at all interested in that. Interesting descriptions of the Fens, that part of England. Kind of small town life and trying to figure out what's going on there. Ah, Dorothy L. Sayers, she is a wonderful mystery writer, and she's also very literary, which is a surprisingly wonderful combination, at least when she does it. I also finally finished The Bird in the Tree by Elizabeth Goudge, the first in the Elliot family trilogy. So, Lucilla Elliot, she is the matriarch of her family. After her husband died, she found, does it say on here? Can't remember the name of the house, but she found a house in rural England which she created as a refuge for her family. And so, specifically after the First World War, her husband was dead, her favorite son was dead, she was raising his son, her grandson, refuge for them and anyone else in the family that needed it. Now it's what, 15, 20 years later, and is still a refuge. Another son, he and his wife are having marital problems, and so she has their 3 children there, her grandchildren now, and the grandson, who's probably her favorite, and more importantly, the one who understands her the best, the one primarily who she made this refuge for all those years ago, at least back then, the one who understands her the best. He comes with news that could tear the family apart and destroy that refuge. And so she decides to fight for it. And it goes on from there. Amazingly good. I also read Miss Clare Remembers. We met Miss Clare already in the first 3 Miss Reed books. At that point, she is a little old lady, probably in her 60s, I want to say. And we see her retire during those to the house. Actually, I think she was still living there, but yeah, the house that she wasn't born in, she basically grew up in. Well, this book goes all the way back to her birth and explains exactly how Miss Clare became Miss Clare. All the things she went through, all the things she saw, her friendship with her best friend Emily Davis, how the school has changed from her perspective over the years. Greatly enjoyed it. Love Miss Clare. I also read Kilmeny of the Orchard by L.M. Montgomery. And I read this for Montgomery. This was the group read. And I'd have to agree with the consensus. The language is as beautiful as only L.M. Montgomery can make it, but the story is fairly slight. Apparently, she had a book contract to do, and so she basically doubled the size of one of her short stories, which explains a lot. Like I said, the description's beautiful. It's a sweet story. Don't like what she does with the Italian boy. It'd be better today if it was done a different way. But still a fun read. Not Ella Montgomery's best work, though. I would definitely start with Anna Green Gables or Emily of New Moon, personally. Or if you want something a bit more mature, shall we say, Blue Castle. After probably 8-10 months, I finally finished reading The Letters of Dorothy Sayers, Volume 2, 1937 to 1943. So during this time, a lot of important changes happened to Dorothy. She started writing plays, specifically plays for religious festivals, almost passion plays, well, of a similar genre without actually being about the passion. Starting with the zeal of thy house, about the rebuilding of a cathedral that was damaged in a storm, maybe by lightning too. Well, there was that. And she got pulled into apologetic work, especially after writing her 10-12 episode series on the life of Christ, the man who would be king. Excellent play, by the way. And so you have lots of letters detailing, going back and forth about the plays, about this production, about her apologetic writings, responses to that, responses to her plays or to the BBC broadcast, as well as the more normal letters between friends, including the first couple letters to C.S. Lewis. Really looking forward to going through Volume 3, which I've already started. Don't expect that I'll get that done anytime soon, though. Yes. I also read Squire by Tamora Pearce. This is the third book in the Protector of the Small series. So here we're going back to Kel, her years as a squire, in which in some ways life gets complicated, both personally and as a squire. The prince, who has already been knighted by this point, I think, has an arranged marriage, and so the princess comes over and there's a royal procession forever, it seems. There's a baby griffin. She actually ends up being the squire of Sir Raoul, who is over the king's own. Kel's already met him, and so this is a good thing. They know each other. He respects her. And maybe that's a tad of a spoiler, but you find out about that in the first chapter. So it's hard to say who I like better, Alana or Kel. They're both great protagonists. And I also read, or rather looked at mostly, Myth and Magic, The Art of John Howe. John Howe. John Howe is one of the three big names in Tolkien art, along with Ted Naismith and Alan Lee. He, along with Alan Lee, were also invited by Peter Jackson, both for the Lord of the Rings films and the Hobbit films, to basically be in charge of visual design. And so they would have meetings, they'd spend all their time doing sketches of things, show them to Peter Jackson, and if he liked something, they'd send it on to Weta workshops or whoever needed to see it. So, very fun. And in fact, this does have a foreword by Peter Jackson. And an afterword by Alan Lee. So plenty of pictures and plenty of commentary about the pictures. And this has not just Lord of the Rings and Hobbit work or Tolkien work. There are other fantastical things. He's done covers for tons of fantasy books and all sorts of things. So I enjoyed going through this. Anyway, that is what I managed to read in the month of May, which is a pretty good amount, I have to say. Just double checking and not missing anything important, and it doesn't look like it. So, have to remember to do a mid-month report. Didn't get to that this last month, which is why this is so long. But I hope that your May reading was just as fun. I'd love to hear all about it, or if you've read any of these things, I'd love to hear what you think about it. Thank you so much for stopping by. Truly do appreciate it. So until next time, hope we all stay safe and healthy. And as always, happy reading.